5, 4, we've gone for main engine start. We have main engine start. Come on, baby.
Some of the fear went out of space exploration. Another aspect of the unknown is now known. Another barrier has been shattered, and this particular venture into space and back will never seem as frightening again. The most extraordinary aspect of it is the technology, the engineering that made it possible, but it is probably the courage of man that we celebrate today, that willingness to step into the void where no one has ever stepped before. It is that quality of courage that today's generation of space explorers holds in common with other generations of explorers who also sailed off into uncharted seas. That's what we'll be talking about. This remarkable breed of men and women who cause us to shake our heads ever so slightly, even as we admire them. We begin with today's heroes, Young and Crippen.
It began long before sunrise, when it was clear that a spectacular day lay ahead for the first attempt at launching America's space shuttle. It all seemed to be going perfectly from the start. 2:30 a.m. After being awakened, astronauts John Young and Bob Crippen have their traditional steak and eggs breakfast, then a quick physical. 3:10 a.m. Suiting up after getting a final weather briefing. No problems anywhere. 3:50 a.m. They leave the crew quarters for pad 39. 4:30 a.m., they begin getting in the Columbia after final checks in the White Room. All this time, the countdown ticks away smoothly toward their 6:50 a.m. launch time. Then the troubles began.
The crew has had a small problem with the comparison of the backup program. That's a software program in the flight computers, and we'll be re-examining that during the 10-minute hold at the T-minus 9-minute point.
But within minutes, Launch Control announced the problem had been solved. Then another failure. A bulky fuel cell, important because it supplies electricity for the Columbia and in the process, drinking water. Within minutes, a solution. But the computer problem returned. At Launch Control's orders, a fresh set of directions is fed into the computers. The computers, there are 4 primary and 1 backup, still didn't agree. The 5th or backup computer consistently disagreed with the solutions offered by the other 4 computers. Mission rules forbid takeoff, in fact, unless all 5 computers are working and in agreement, and they never did. A last attempt was made at reprogramming the computer while the inertial measurement unit, a system of gyros that guides the spacecraft through space, needed realigning. More time on the pad. The 2 astronauts had now been lying on their backs in their ejection seats for 6 hours. Just before 10 a.m., the scrub order came.
The launch director, George Page, and center director, Dick Smith, have just announced that we will scrub the launch attempt for today. We will stop the clock probably at the T-minus 9-minute point and send out a crew to open the hatch of the orbiter and take the crew back to the astronaut quarters.
7 a.m. Cape Canaveral. Time to try again for the Space Shuttle Columbia.
6, 5, 4, we've gone for main engine start. We have main engine start. Come on, baby. Go!
This time, Columbia is launched with textbook perfection. America's first space shuttle with its 2-man crew is propelled into orbit with all systems go for a full 2-day mission.
It began again at the early hour of 2 a.m. The astronauts ate Canadian bacon and eggs for breakfast, then after suiting up, walked down the hall of the crew building, into the transfer van, and finally into the shuttle at pad 39A, exactly as they had Friday morning. But the atmosphere was as different as the sky was faultlessly clear. Tinges of orange, brown, and black in a rosewood-like color, with little or no wind. You couldn't have had a better day for launching.
5, 4, we've gone for main engine start.
The brilliant white cloud of smoke from the rockets obscured all from view for a few moments. Then there were no more doubts. Right on schedule, 2 minutes into the flight, the solid rockets burned out and separated.
There it is. There they go. Roger on the SIP, Columbia.
The shuttle's main engines kept burning as planned for another 6 minutes, providing Bob Crippen with his first view from space.
What a view, what a view. Glad you're enjoying it.
Then the orbital maneuvering system engines ignited 4 times, placing the shuttle into the planned 150 nautical mile circular orbit. Even John Young was impressed.
Well, if you hadn't changed any, it's really something else. I tell you, John had been telling me about him for 3 years, but ain't no way you can describe it.
The first major task, opening and closing the payload bay doors. After a bit of stickiness, they worked just fine. And live television from the cameras inside the payload bay showed us what they saw in orbit. This view looks backward, toward the rear of the Columbia, showing us the vertical fin and rudder, the coverings over the orbital maneuvering system engines, and more than a dozen missing heat tiles. 7 hours into the flight, new TV, and the astronauts had this report.
I guess being the so-called rookie on this flight, I had a thrill from the moment of liftoff all the way up to what we're doing now. It's really been super. The spacecraft has worked as advertised all the way along.
No one is sure, but they don't think the heat tile loss is critical.
These tiles missing will not have any effect on the safety during entry of the vehicle.
We have no reason to believe that we have any other tile problems anywhere.
But despite that confidence, NASA is scrambling to take high-resolution pictures from the ground to make sure no tiles are missing from the Columbia's underside. Because the spacecraft will re-enter the atmosphere underside first at a 40-degree angle, those tiles are crucial to protecting the astronauts from the intense heat of re-entry. Just one missing tile in a critical area could result in a burn through the spacecraft. The tiles themselves work beautifully, made from silica fiber, a substance so absorbent, this sample tile could be heated to 2,300 degrees, and it would still be cool enough for me to be able to pick it up by the corners. But attaching the tiles, all 32,000 of them, to the orbiter has been a problem all along. Despite a sophisticated manufacturing process involving computer specifications for each tile, and despite a space-age glue to bond them to the orbiter, a number of tiles fell off during the Columbia's piggyback flight from the manufacturer in California to Cape Canaveral. Nearly all the tiles then had to be reinforced and reattached, causing a major delay in the launch.
Welcome to day 2. Well, many hours went into this thing. A job well done by the shuttle space team. We can't say she's sleek and lean, but I'll tell you right now, she's a mean machine. The Columbia.
All right.
As day 2 dawned for the Columbia, astronauts Young and Crippen had just one complaint.
Well, it certainly got a little bit chilly last night. Was about ready to break out the long undies.
But the cool temperature in the cabin was considered a good sign by Mission Control. The orbiter is apparently working so efficiently, its machines are generating less heat than expected. All other systems appeared to check out, and the Columbia's cameras were also cooperating.
Okay, John and Cripp, and that is excellent television we're getting.
Yeah, those are really super cameras. I knew it was going to make John a star here.
On a pass over Australia, time out for a greeting.
I got a little Slim Dusty and Waltzing Matilda for our friends down under here.
And then back over a cloudy USA, another few orbits, and Vice President Bush was on the phone.
I think your trip is just going to ignite the excitement and the forward thinking from this country, so I really just wanted to call up and wish you the very best.
We certainly appreciate it, Mr. Vice President. Thank you very much, sir.
Young and Crippen appeared delighted to talk with the Vice President, and late today, another television show from space of the astronauts that work in the cabin. They'll be turning in early because they have a 3:50 a.m. wake-up call to begin the arduous preparations for the return to Earth.
Good morning, boy. Oh, John. Creepy. Time to wake up. Time to get up for the big splashdown today.
Good morning, Columbia. This is Houston, and we have a real-time 482 for you. In that last wake-up song, we'd like you to scratch out splashdown and insert touchdown.
On the morning of their return to Earth, Mission Control woke astronauts John Young and Bob Crippen by sounding reveille. They were up early and in good shape and spirits. On one of their final orbits, they sent back these last pictures of Earth from 167 miles up. Then they closed the payload bay doors, which had passed all their tests for the last time. Columbia was made ready for its return to Earth. Over the Indian Ocean, out of range of any tracking station, they fired the onboard maneuvering system engines, slowing the spaceplane just enough to end its orbital velocity. Confirmation that the burn had worked came over Guam in the Pacific. Turned around now, so it could become an airplane again, Columbia re-entered, its heat tiles glowing with a 3,000-degree temperature as it penetrated the Earth's atmosphere. Radio blackout lasted 16 minutes. At Edwards Air Force Base, its intended landing site, the convoy of support vehicles was ready, its specialists waiting to safe the Columbia from toxic fuels and rescue the crew if they needed to.
Columbia is about 10 seconds away from acquisition through Guam. We'll stand by.
4 T-38 chase jets, 2 with live TV cameras, took off to meet the shuttle on its landing. The Columbia first became visible to high-powered cameras at Anderson Peak on the California coast at Vandenberg Air Force Base.
We have a live television picture from the optical tracker at Anderson Peak.
Columbia,
Dead on the ground
very
track.
quiet to it.
Let's go out in here, too. What a way to come to California. Your data looks pretty good for here.
Roger that. Looking good. We're looking at them. And you're coming right down the chute.
Rudder active now, looking good. Range 73 miles.
Columbia, we're go for air data. You're out of 89K, 2.8 Mach. Columbia, you're coming right down the track. The tracking data, nav data, and pre-plan trajectory are all one line on our plot board here.
Roger, we can correct.
Miles.
Columbia, you're going subsonic now, out of 50K, looking good.
Roger that.
Columbia, you're coming right around the hack, looking beautiful.
Control very smooth.
Columbia, you're really looking good, right on the money, right on the money.
Airspeed 271 knots. Fido says it couldn't be any better. 11,000 feet.
That's real good underneath.
Yeah. 2,500 feet there.
About half an inch off the horizon.
We can see it now.
Go down. 50 feet. 40, 30, 20, 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, down. 10 feet. 5, 4, 3, touchdown. Look about, skipper.
After the picture book landing, the convoy rolled up to the Columbia, but then moving with great caution, it took more than an hour to get the hatch open. There were some toxic fuel remnants that had to be cleaned away before John Young, the spacecraft commander, could emerge. Once he had, he did a pilot's post-flight walk-around inspection and was overjoyed at the lack of damage he found. The heat tiles up front and the landing gear and tires looked in fine condition. Co-pilot Bob Crippen was much slower in getting out. He'd stayed behind, finishing cleanup work. But he, too, was obviously pleased. For a first flight, after dire predictions, the Columbia astonished everyone. So the Columbia had proved that a shuttle can fly safely, but the economics of its future remain to be seen.
While the astronauts were unable to publicly talk about the mission, NASA officials were more than willing to express their enthusiasm.
Well, I think we're very near to the Star Wars 2001 era. I think we're right there. We're right on the doorsteps.
What were your feelings when the Columbia touched down?
Actually, I cried. And I was sort of embarrassed because I was trying to keep my back to all the people that were taking pictures and that. But it's just the point where you've worked with the crew, you've worked with the flight controllers for many missions, and this time here, I think maybe I wished I was 20 years younger at this time. I wished I was starting over just like I started in Mercury.
It's always great to be back in Big Houston.
They were back to a Texas-style welcome after 36.5 orbits around the world, nearly 1 million miles, man's first ride in a reusable spacecraft. Parents brought their children to see and hear the astronauts. Young and Crippen had high praise for their spaceship.
It is an incredibly amazing piece of machinery. And anytime you can take something that big and put it into space and bring it back and land it on a runway, you have just accomplished something just short of a miracle, I believe.
Mostly, they had high praise for each other.
Now, Bob is a very smart young man, and he also works very hard. And he kept me out of a lot of trouble on that flight.
For me to get a chance to fly with a guy like John Young and for him to come out with words like that, well, most of you have to know John to understand that. I was just hanging on, hoping he'd point me in the right direction.
And thanks for their colleagues at NASA.
Most of you standing out here in front of me have done what John and I have been doing for about the past 9 years. We've been busting our buns to get the space shuttle up. Well, let me tell you, it was well worth the effort. We've got one fantastic machine, and we have given the country one marvelous technological capability. For me personally, it was the darndest time I've ever had in my entire life.
The shuttle was a high point in the lives of thousands of NASA employees who worked 6 years on the project.
Oh, we're having a great time. We're very proud of what happened. We're all happy about it. It's been a long drought, and we're glad we're back.
It's going to be a long time before the Space Shuttle program is as busy or productive as its planners hoped. This shuttle, the Columbia, will be ready for spaceflight fairly soon, sometime this fall, after it undergoes initial refurbishing here at Edwards and major work at Cape Canaveral. There are other shuttles in the coming NASA fleet, but their launch dates are much later. Challenger will be shuttle number 2, scheduled to fly late next year. And Discovery, shuttle number 3, is less than half completed at the Rockwell plant in Downey, California. These spacecraft will be a lot different with numerous electrical and instrumentation changes. Most important, they will have more tiles toughened to take the stresses of launch and re-entry, tiles that will have a higher boron content and are changed so they won't fall off so easily. Solid rocket boosters from the Columbia, which separated 2 minutes after liftoff and were recovered soon later, are being taken back to NASA and in 2 years will boost another shuttle back into space. They are considered a complete success and will save $11 million per future shuttle flight. So the Columbia has worked magnificently on its first flight, proving that winged reusable spacecraft can work, but the cost per flight has yet to be worked out, and economics, not technology, will decide the future of the space shuttle.
Finally, some thoughts about space exploration from a writer who has thought a great deal about it and spent considerable time interviewing astronauts and pilots and engineers and investigating the space program. Tom Wolfe, author of the best-selling book about test pilots, The Right Stuff, was asked, is it really worth it?
I think it gets down to how much importance you attach to the exploration of the rest of the universe. Now, I happen to think that if you live in the period in which man for the first time is able to explore the rest of the universe, it's an irresistible thing to do. And I think we're going to kick ourselves for having slowed down, put the brakes on so fast and it started after Apollo 11. I mean, that was the beginning of the end of the space program was with the success of Apollo 11. Same thing happened to Columbus. Columbus's voyages to America were a government project, the court of Ferdinand and Isabella. Columbus made 4 voyages to the New World. NASA made 6 voyages to the moon. After each voyage, NASA, like Columbus, asked for more funding. After each voyage, NASA, like Columbus, was asked, well, what have you really done for us with all of this? And in each case, somewhat specious answers were forthcoming. Columbus was always talking about the gold that he was going to bring back and the terrific slaves that he was going to bring back. And when it came to slaves, he ran up against the Carib Indians who would fight to the last unbroken hyoid bone rather than going to slavery. He never brought one Carib Indian back. And no gold. The only thing he could bring back was cotton, and they were overset on cotton in Europe anyway. NASA kept having to talk about Teflon frying pans. Well, we developed the Teflon frying pan. We've got a pen that'll write in a weightless environment, a very useful item. We've developed a computerized, miniaturized system so that doctors will no longer have to make house calls. It's great. All of these things, NASA was desperately trying to find justifications because there seemed to be no way that you could present the great justification, which is, this is perhaps the greatest adventure of mankind.
5, 4, we've gone for main engine start.
Incredibly amazing piece of machinery. And anytime you can take something that big and put it into space and bring it back and land it on a runway, you have just accomplished something just short of a miracle, I believe.